του Εθνικού και Καπιταλιστικού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, αγαπητές και αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, αγαπητοί και φιλτάτοι προσκεκλημένοι μας, έχουμε μεγάλη χαρά απόψε που έχουμε την ευκαιρία Ευχαριστώ, Βίκτορα. Μεγάλη μας είναι η χαρά και ιδιαίτερη τιμή να καλωσορίζουμε την αγαπητή μας προσκεκλημένη που αύριο πρόκειται να αναγορευτεί σε επίτιμη διδάκτορα του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της σχολής μας, ώστε να ακούσουμε σήμερα μία βαρισίμαντη παρουσίασή της και παρέμβασή της που νομίζω ότι υπερβαίνει τα όρια τα μουσικολογικά, ακόμα και τα μουσικοπαιδαγωγικά, και αγγίζει το εσώτατο είναι μας, αγγίζει την αυτογνωσία μας, τη δυνατότητα να αναγνωρίζουμε στοιχεία τα οποία υφίστανται εμφανώς ή λανθανόντως εντός μας, η έννοια της αυτογνωσίας, η έννοια της δυνατότητας κατανόησης των δυνατοτήτων που υπάρχουν στον καθέναν από εμάς, ίσως είναι μια ουσιαστικά αναγνώριση της λανθάνωσας δύναμης, η οποία εναπόκειται σε εμάς, αγαπητές και αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, να αναγνωριστεί, να αναδειχθεί και να αξιοποιηθεί. Ξέρετε πολύ καλά ότι ασχολούμαστε με εξειδικευμένα ζητήματα, που είναι ζητήματα της μουσικής εκπαίδευσης, είναι ζητήματα της μουσικής ταυτότητας, είναι ζητήματα του τρόπου με τον οποίο μπορούμε να μεταδώσουμε τις δικές μας γνώσεις, δεξιότητες, ικανότητες, πολλό δε μάλλον όταν αναφερόμαστε σε άτομα τα οποία ακόμα είναι σε νηπιακή ηλικία, η νηπιακή ηλικία όσον αφορά στη δυνατότητα της αυτογνωσίας, δηλαδή της δυνατότητας να μπορεί κανείς να αναγνωρίζει στοιχεία τα οποία μπορεί να αξιοποιήσει, και αυτή την ευκαιρία μας την δίδει η αγαπητή μας προσκεκλημένη, η καθηγήτρια Μπρέσλερ, η οποία απόψε έχουμε την πραγματικά μοναδική ευκαιρία να ακούσουμε τις παρατηρήσεις της, οι οποίες πέρα από το μουσικολογικό επίπεδο, πέρα από την μουσικοπαιδαγωγική διάσταση, αγγίζουν αυτήν ακριβώς την πεμπτουσία της ψυχής όλων των ακροατών, δηλαδή τη δυνατότητα αυτογνωσίας, μουσικής αυτογνωσίας, αλλά και ταυτότητας, ενσυνειδησίας, δυνατότητας να αναγνωρίζουμε πρώτα τα στοιχεία εκείνα τα οποία υπάρχουν εντός μας και να μπορούμε να τα αξιοποιήσουμε επωφελία της διδασκαλίας την οποία επιχειρούμε σε επίπεδο σπουδής οποιασδήποτε βαθμίδας στην πρωτοβάθμια, δευτεροβάθμια και τριτοβάθμια εκπαίδευση. Πιστεύω ότι αναμένουμε την παρουσίασή της, την ομιλία της, πραγματικά με ιδιαίτερο ενδιαφέρον, διότι από ό,τι είδα και από ό,τι διαισθάνομαι, ο τρόπος με τον οποίο θα παρουσιάσει το θέμα της είναι ένας τρόπος ρηξικέλευτος, καινοτόμος, ένας τρόπος όχι και τόσο αναμενόμενος και συνηθισμένος. Και αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό, γιατί πολλές φορές προσερχόμαστε να ακούσουμε παρουσιάσεις, ομιλίες, οι οποίες μπορεί ενδεχομένως να έχουν διαμορφώσει και των προτέρων μία άποψη για το τι θα ακούσουμε. Εδώ έχω την αίσθηση ότι θα ακούσουμε κάτι το οποίο όλες και όλοι δεν περιμένουμε να το ακούσουμε. Είναι δηλαδή ένας ιδιαίτερος τρόπος ο οποίος προέρχεται από την εμπειρία, από την ωριμότητα, από όλη αυτήν την κεκτημένη γνώση των ετών έρευνας, διδασκαλίας, αλλά και αυτοσυνειδησίας της ομιλήτριας, που θα συνδυάσει στοιχεία όχι μόνο της ειδικής αναφοράς, ειδικής θεματικής αναφοράς, αλλά θα πιάσει και εκείνες τις ευαίσθητες χορδές που όλες και όλους εμάς ως καλλιτέχνες μας απασχολούν, μας ενδιαφέρουν και οφείλουν να είναι στο επίκεντρο του ενδιαφέροντος, της προσοχής και των αναζητήσεών μας. Οπότε, καλωσορίζω την αγαπημένη μας καθηγήτρια, της εύχομαι τα καλύτερα και αύριο αναμένουμε να πανηγυρίσουμε την υποδοχή της στο Εθνικό και Καποδιστριακό Πανεπιστήμιο ως επίτιμης διδάκτορας του τμήματός μας, του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της σχολής μας, της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής, αυτής της μεγάλης οικογένειας του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών. Και σήμερα το ακροατήριο θα έχει αυτή τη μοναδική ευκαιρία να πάρει μια πρόγευση των δεξιοτήτων, των γνώσεων, της εμπειρίας, της ωριμότητας που έχει να μας μεταδώσει η συνάδελφος μέσα από τη δική της μαρτυρία, ώστε να δικαιολογηθεί αυτή η αποδιδόμενη τιμή εκ μέρους του τμήματος, της σχολής και του Ιδρύματός μας. Καλωσορίζουμε λοιπόν την αγαπητή μας καθηγήτρια, κυρία Μπρέσλερ, και την καλούμε στο βήμα να λάβει τον λόγο και απευθύνω και εκ μέρους της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής εγκάρδιες, συγχαρητήριες προσδρήσεις και προς την Πρόεδρο του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών και προς τη Διευθύντρια του τομέα της μουσικής παιδαγωγικής για αυτήν την πρωτοβουλία, για αυτή την πρόσκληση και για αυτή την ευκαιρία το Ίδρυμά μας, η σχολή μας, το τμήμα μας να καλωσορίζει στις τάξεις της μία καθηγήτρια, μία συνάδελφο αυτής της περιοπής. Αναμένουμε να ακούσουμε τη δική της μαρτυρία, τη δική της διδαχή, τη δική της νοθεσία, με ευήκοα ότα, με ανοιχτά τα ότα, αλλά κυρίως και τους πόρους γενικότερα της ψυχής μας, προκειμένου να γίνουμε σοφότεροι, διδασκόμενοι από τη δική της πραγματικά εμπειρία. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ και παρακαλώ την αγαπητή συνάδελφο να λάβει το λόγο.
Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Ναι, okay. Καλησπέρα σε όλους. I will speak in English for Liora. Dear Liora, we are very honored to have you here as an invited professor who tomorrow will be the doctorate honoraris in our university. And really, I have read 2 or 3 of your articles. I'm sorry, there are so many, 120. And I can say that you are in the mainstream of the education of the 21st century because you are talking about the music embodiment and the arts in the education, which is one of the crucial things that in our days, we are speaking here in Greece about that because we have many problems with the recognition of the skills of the artists in the secondary and after secondary education. And we are talking about how many hours do the children have to be taught at school arts. Only 1 hour, music, and no dance, and no theater, nothing at all. And so many lessons that have nothing to do with arts. And after they go to pedopsychologists just to find their inner self. And so welcome to the country of Socrates, who has spoken about inner self, gnosis αυτόν. And it's very important that today you're going to talk about this issue in education and how crucial is in the future to have more hours about arts, like maybe in Scandinavian countries, they give so much importance on the arts in the childhood, and how like that we are going to educate the citizens of tomorrow in a very difficult period with all the social media and the era of AI, which will, of course, make another digital transformation in the education. So I will going to be very brief. I know that you have visited many countries and you have been honored by many universities, and you are the editor of the Journal of Education and the Arts, and your work is very important. But first of all, I will say that you share a lot of things with us because you were born in Israel, and you share this culture that we have here with the climate and the people and the customs that bring people together. And this is the reason that at your university, at Illinois, you started to do this research in order to promote the role of community and of sociology in the arts, in the education. And this is very important. To bring it also in our schools. So first of all, to thank Smaro for this invitation. Thank you very much, Smaro, that we are going to honor Liora, and of course our Dean, who is organizing this lecture today, and are invited. And tomorrow we are going to speak more about your work, and thank you very much for being here.
Ναι, ωραία. Καλησπέρα και από μένα. Πολύ γρήγορα απλώς θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω για την ευκαιρία αυτή που μας δίνεται σήμερα τον Κοσμήτορα, τον κύριο Αχιλλέα Χαλδεάκη, που πάντα αγκαλιάζει και υποστηρίζει τις εκδηλώσεις της Φιλοσοφικής και του Τμήματός μας ιδιαίτερα. Την πρόεδρό μας, την κυρία Γεωργάκη, που πάντα μας παρενεί να συμμετέχουμε σε δράσεις οι οποίες αναδεικνύουν το τμήμα μας και το βγάζουν προς τα έξω. Και ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ όλους εσάς, φίλους, συναδέλφους, φοιτητές, φοιτήτριες που ήρθατε σήμερα εδώ. Έχουμε τη μεγάλη χαρά να φιλοξενούμε την καθηγήτρια Liora Bresler, που έχω την χαρά να τη θεωρώ φίλη, μέντορα, συνάδελφο εδώ και πολλά χρόνια. Είναι από τους πρωτοπόρους στον χώρο της διασύνδεσης των τεχνών, από τους ανθρώπους που πρώτος μίλησε, έγραψε, ερεύνησε τη διασύνδεση όλων των τεχνών στην εκπαίδευση, αλλά και σαν φιλοσοφία. Η ίδια είναι μουσικολόγος, το πρώτο της πτυχίο έχει κάνει σπουδές στη μουσική εκπαίδευση και τη μουσικολογία πριν να προχωρήσει στην εκπαίδευση των τεχνών. Με τον Έλιο Τάισνερ ολοκλήρωσε το διδακτορικό της. Ο τρόπος με τον οποίο αντιλαμβάνεται το χώρο βασίζεται στις ευαισθησίες του καλλιτέχνη, αντιλαμβάνεται την έρευνα αισθητικά, τη βλέπει μέσα από τη διάσταση της μουσικής καλλιτεχνίας και της αισθητικής θεωρίας. Επομένως, είναι ιδιαίτερος ο τρόπος που θα παρουσιάσει τα στοιχεία αυτά, που θα μας μιλήσει σήμερα για την ανάπτυξη και την καλλιέργεια του ερευνητικού εαυτού, του καλλιτέχνη ως ερευνητή, και θα μιλήσει πολύ βιωματικά, γιατί είναι ο τρόπος της πάρα πολύ άμεσος και βιωματικός. Οπότε έχουμε πολύ μεγάλη χαρά σήμερα και αύριο η ομιλία της, επίσης στην αναγόρευσή της, θα έχει αρκετά στοιχεία βιωματικά. Σας προσκαλούμε και αύριο, αν έχετε τη δυνατότητα, να την παρακολουθήσετε. Αλλά για να μην καθυστερούμε άλλο, dear Liora, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm honored. I'm very honored, but I'm also very touched and extremely grateful. Thank you for the very generous words, Achilleas and Anastasia. And thank you, Smaro, for bringing me here. It's really a great joy. And when you said things, I thought nobody that I know have articulated it. So it really is true that Socrates and Heraclitus were very fundamental to everything that I know. And so much more, but I have 40, 45 minutes. I won't say many of the things that I want to say. We'll have more time for more opportunities for conversation. So what I'll do, my focus today is on research that is informed by aesthetic musical, that has been my own journey, but bigger than that, aesthetic more broadly. And I will focus on research, but I just chatting quickly, it seems that some people are, all of us are teachers, of course, and some people, that's what they do as their primary occupation. And I would love to talk maybe in the questions and answers, in the reception, what does it mean? Because these things actually are deeply grounded in teaching. I will focus on research, but we can take the conversation into teaching because it's very relevant. And I also want to say, I never meant to be a researcher. I was trying to be useful. And I am kind of a doer. I like to do things. And I always was worried that researchers can be a little useless, like they can write all their 129 papers or whatever, and are they really useful? And one of the things that I learned, I talked just a little bit with Evie about it 2 nights ago, but research, I found it in my life unexpectedly to be very meaningful and transformative journey that actually informs certainly my teaching, but also my mothering, my wifing, my friending, my being with myself, the inner things that you talked about. And so I find it very meaningful. I choose to do it. You know, all of us, we could have done so many things with our lives, right? And I'm glad and grateful that I was able to do that. And I will talk about ideas, but I will provide hopefully very vivid examples of what these ideas mean in actual field work, and if you want to take that conversation in actual teaching and being. And if I talk about something and you think, why is she talking about it? How is it relevant? Please ask me. Do me the favor of allowing me, because in my mind, I think I know, but like Socrates, sometimes I don't know that I don't know, but I think I know. So the opportunity to make it explicit, and if I haven't thought about it fully, to take it and continue to think. So please, when you listen, it's really an invitation, and tomorrow it's a different kind of talk, it's a different invitation, but it's an invitation to ask what is relevant in your life, in your inquiry, in your teaching, and what is not clear, maybe not so relevant, and bring it to our conversation. Is that okay? So I want to say, when I was thinking about the research journey, and as you said so well, we deal with the outside world, but it's an inner process. It's an interaction between inside and outside. And then when I was thinking about images, there are different kind of journeys, right? Sometimes it's clear sailing, like I stay in a beautiful hotel next to the water, very peaceful sea. And sometimes it's kind of, you see the past, you don't know where it's going, but you see it for a little bit. And then sometimes it's a little shaky and can become even more shakier. And when we do research, it can be all of this, I mean, different times. That's what it looks like. And for those of you that will be tomorrow, how many people may be tomorrow evening? Okay. It's not a test, but if you want, look, I intentionally put a couple of pictures. The talk will be different and the big theme may be different, but there is underlying similarities. So if you want to find a couple of pictures that I use today and tomorrow, just kind of a tantalizing way of playing with it. So when I was asked to talk, knowing that research is a big part of this university, of our profession, I was trying to think, looking back, what is the particular difficult, challenging things of doing research in the beginning, but not just in the beginning. I mean, throughout, it's easy sometimes to forget these things, and I just identified some of those things that I think are important. And I want to say what is so tricky about these things is that they cannot be taught. So my profession, I started to teach in Illinois 1990, and very quickly I realized that when research methodology, that's one of my two, I teach aesthetics in different ways, and I teach research methodology. And as you said, one of the major issues is that these things cannot be taught. The most important things cannot be taught, but they can be cultivated. And so as I think about being a researcher, educator, how do you cultivate? What are some of the ways to cultivate? And a couple of the papers I think that you distributed deal with that. And of course, it doesn't mean that I know it. It's not like, you have a PhD, you look at it, do I have a PhD? Yes, it's on the wall, it's there objectively. But knowing that you don't know, or being tuned or observing well, it's not that you say, yes, I know to observe well, I know how to listen well. No, as soon as you think that you do, it's tricky, that's the ending, right? And so how do we cultivate those things that are so important, so central, and so elusive in many ways? And one of the things, and Smaro is my very good colleague and friend, you will tell me when I speak too fast. And maybe Greek people, because they are like Israelis, maybe you also will tell me that don't worry about being so polite and like, what is she talking about? So if you want just a little slower or a lot slower, tell me, yeah, I will be grateful. I think Smaro and I were in South Africa, and there was a tiny Japanese professor, Shinobu Oko, yeah? And she talked to me. She realized I spoke fast. I spoke faster in 98 than now. And she held a very big sign, and it said, adagio, adagio. And every now and then she would hold it. So it's an invitation. So one of the issues that can happen to beginning researchers, but veteran researchers too, all across, is that we are so occupied with the details, with the trees, with all the things that need to be done, that we lose the big picture. And we'll talk a lot about it. The trees are extremely important. I'm not against the trees, the methods, the procedures, the theories, they are very important. But the big picture, the forest, is central. If we lose the forest, we don't have research. And so that juxtaposition of how we do that, and that means, and I'll touch on it today, that when we do, for example, data analysis, it's central to do analytic and holistic, because more books focus on the analytic, but the holistic is as important. And I think, I think of this talk as appetizers. So I touch on things, and then anything that you want to pursue further, bring it up, we'll talk about it. The other thing that can happen, we lose our voice, we lose our ownership. It can all look like, yes, we did it correctly, but in this, I will talk about qualitative research. This is the one that I've been doing all my life. And it's always the person, if Anastasia and Achilleas and I look at the same situation, it's very possible that we will bring very different lenses to it. And so the notion of who are you, what is your voice, what do you care, and to make it explicit when it's relevant. You don't do it as self-expression, but you do it as to say, here, the reader, this is what I bring. So extremely important part of the forest. The juggling, and these are all kind of elaborations, how when all the things that need to be done, and not to forget why are we doing this? What is important to us? What do we care about? How are we situated about it? So central. And sometimes when I read papers or when I talk as opponent or in other roles, I listen to a talk and I think, where are you? Where have you disappeared? Like under the bag? Or like where is the person? And we don't want it, because it, for different reasons, but intellectually, for the reader, in this kind of research, it's necessary to know how you stand, to occupy it. And these things are, and so I talk about inner compasses, the things that motivate us, and this is important throughout. When you plan, yes, of course, in data collection, in the field work, in data analysis, in writing, in communicating, and I'll provide some examples. So this permeates the whole process. So I was talking about appetizers. 2 weeks ago I was in Switzerland, and it was a Swiss hotel bought by a Chinese company, and so they had lots of Chinese, all the meals were Chinese, and this was one of their kind of something like that. And so it's possible for me to go, and I love Greek food, and there are many things about Greece that I love and I care, and food is one of them. And so I was thinking about food, but unlike the Greek food that I had, sometimes some buffet can be scattering. Like there is so much, I don't know where to look, I eat too much. Indigestion is a very real issue. for people like me. And when you think of research, because we need to read so much, we need to absorb so much papers. We talked about it, but how do we actually digest it, process it, so we don't have indigestion? There is no quick answer, but there are ways to work with it. You know, I'm not used to having, it will come. Oops. Okay. Wait. So I sent. Okay, I was trying to make it. Okay, okay. So let's go for that. Yeah, this was an older version that I didn't check. So some of you know, I think you know Cecilia Björk from Vasa, and now she's in Vienna. Yeah, you know her. And so this is her husband. He's a wonderful chef, and he has a store. If you find yourself in Finland, Vasa, he has a beautiful store with wonderful cakes, and this is one of his creations. And to me, you know, there are so many diverse ingredients here, but they're well organized. It's not scattered. There is a kind of a whole, right? Christophe, his name. So if you go to that store, tell him that I recommend enthusiastically the thing. And so how do you create a research project that has this unity out of the many, many things? And I'm using, and I will come back to it in a few slides, one of the books, the qualitative books that I love in arts education, not music, is the first chapter is called Think of Use, Think of Beauty. And I think when we think about education and when we think about music and musicology and the different, there are things that somehow are useful in very different ways, in schooling, in ways of making well-being, but there are also things of beauty. And I'm reading now, I'm very grateful to Smaro who recommended the book, Uncle Petros and the Goldbach Conjecture. How many people have read this episode? Yeah, anyway, beautiful book. And the uncle talks about math, and he says math is a thing of beauty. It should never be used for people like engineer or business people. This was 50, 60 years ago. The field has changed. But I think that we are in a place that we can combine. We want to be useful. We want to make, as you said, we want to make sure that people, it's not just in psychoanalysis and when people have nervous breakdown, that we can connect to ourselves. And yeah, is it? Yes, mathematics. Uncle Petros, he also wrote Logic Comics that I read 2 weeks ago. I loved it, yes. So the notion, how many, have anybody read Logic Comics? No, I mean, he's a Greek writer, contemporary, beautiful. Doxiades, right, Doxiades, Apostolos Doxiades, beautiful. So that notion, I think, both education and music are things of use, but there are also things of beauty. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but for me, I think for many of us, we are drawn to the beauty of doing research, of teaching, as much as to the practicalities. So this is my metaphor today. And what, of course, I advocate, I am not saying away with the trees. As I said earlier, I want to emphasize it's always an interplay. It's always an interplay between the specific, the detail, and the bigger one. Because the knowledge, the guidelines, the theories are extremely central. And the forest is, again, at different stages. Why are we doing? What are we doing? And that permeates this. I used an image that was created by my good friend Rita Irwin. I don't know if orthography is big, arts-based research. She's one of the people who has made arts-based orthography important. And in her picture, the trees are blurred. And of course, it's very natural, it's very human to lose sometimes the tree and the forest, and you don't know where you're going and why. It's a natural part of the process. But to stay with it, to continue to listen, and to be with that. So now is I remember years ago, and this is a sentence by Maxine Greene. Is Maxine Greene a big name in Greece? She's a lady philosopher, feisty, she passed away several years ago, feisty, powerful woman of great integrity, and she was talking about seeing more in a way that makes a lot of sense. And what does it take? How can you teach people to see more? And this sentence by John Dewey, maybe tomorrow I will say something about my own path and how I became from a person in Israel, a person who was trained to be useful, how did I become a researcher in education. But so more on that tomorrow, but that sentence in the very first class that I took with Elliot Eisner by John Dewey was very important to me. Recognition is perception arrested before it has the chance to develop freely. So you recognize Michalis and Smaro and black boots and cell phones and coats and a blue tie and a kind of a body, I recognize it. But perception is actually looking, kind of taking it in and re-seeing it ahead. I want to say that this is, for those who would like to, it's on page 52 in John Dewey's book, Art as Experience. And I remember sitting in that class with Elliot Eisner and reading the title, Art as Experience, and thinking, I love the way that he talked about art because I specialized in aesthetics when I studied philosophy in Israel. And when I was reading then Kant and Hegel, the great people, it didn't resonate. It didn't actually speak to me. And then the notion of John Dewey about art as experience, it made experiential sense. He put it so well for me. But then this was my first semester as a research assistant in the social sciences in education. And what I immediately was thinking, I remember, but research also is intensified experience. Research is an experience. I always thought that researchers were very sophisticated, sitting in basements, analyzing musical things, very big heads and almost nothing else, maybe tiny legs to carry that very big head. And then when I was in the field, I didn't feel like that at all. I felt more like a puppy with a very big nose and a very... Do you have Red Riding Hood in Greece? Yeah. So remember the wolf when he says he had this kind of like very big eyes. Normally I'm quick, I'm superficial, but when I'm in the field, my eyes become very big, my ears become very big, my nose becomes huge, and it's all connected with the mind. And so there is intensification of seeing. There is a seeing more just because I have a notebook, just because I know that I'm going to report, to communicate, to make something hopefully of use and beauty. And so that was really important to me, almost one of the texts that really shaped me. And then, so now I want to connect that to very real ways, and maybe a couple of stories from my own research. So it's not just a slogan, something that, like this professor says this or that. But practically, one of the things that we want to do in data analysis is to, after each time, in addition to the coding and the other important things to do, to look at it and to say, what am I getting out of it in a holistic way, in the same way that you get from a good novel? What does it do? How does it address what I want to understand? How does it lead me to other curiosities? And when needed to make changes in the route, because it's one of the basic things in this kind of methodology, is we do the best planning that we can, but once we are in the field, then we understand so much more about what we study, and then sometimes it's very wise to make changes, to add context, to do other things. And I will do just a couple of examples, especially because I understood, because I was talking very quickly with teachers in schools. So that was one of the first times that I would hit. It was a big project, National Endowment for the Arts, and we looked, Bob Stake, excellent, one of the top researchers in the country, and myself at arts education in the United States. And so this was an example of something that, where it was really much more being in the field and seeing more that I was able to create, to change a design. So the story was, we looked at arts education, and each of us had their own sites. One of the things that became very clear is that most teachers in music, visual art, dance, and drama, this was our assignment, did things that I later called teacher-centered, very imitative. So the teachers would say, like, if visual art, the Easter bunnies, around April, you first do this, you cut 6 whiskers, you choose, you paste, you cut, very clear guidelines. And the same principle of doing growth one by one in dance, in music, the teacher would play something and then there would be a repetition, but without other kind of thing. So there was very strong sense of imitation and rote, and I wrote about it in kind of real examples of schools. And I thought, in the arts, this is one thing that we can really talk about additional things. But at that point, I was just noting and trying to understand. And then I would talk with individual teachers, and I always interview people after I do observations, because when I interview, I become more real. When I do observations, I'm never a fly on the wall, but I'm less of a person. And so when I would ask them, tell me, what is art for you? What does it really mean for you? They would say things like, oh, art is so expressive. It expresses the unique part of you. It's emotional. It's kind of... And I look at them, and this was very strange, because most of them didn't do that in the classroom, right? They were doing the opposite. And so first I thought, this was a long time ago, I was a beginning professor, but they still think I'm a professor. They tell me what they think they should say, but I wasn't sure. So I asked them, do you do arts? And more than 50%, I'm talking about mostly general classroom teachers, have been involved in the arts, singing Sweet Adeline, singing in church, being artists in the weekend. And they have actually been doing arts. So being Israeli, direct, not very tactful like many people in the US, I asked them, can I come with you? And they were very polite. They said, yes, you can. And when I would see some of these pictures, I remember this kindergarten teacher who was, after a long day, I was exhausted just watching her. I'm thinking of our conversation, just, 8 hours of teaching kindergartens. And she has been doing it not for Professor Bresler. She has been singing in Sweet Adeline for 13 years. She was a single mother. She had 3 children. And when I saw her on stage singing, I thought, yeah, she talks about what she is doing in her private spaces. And both of these are really different than what she's doing in the public place. So first, to connect it to here, the notion of trying to figure out what is happening, looking at that contradiction that was tantalizing, changing because this woman or these people, there were several in different places, allowed me to come to their spaces. And then identifying an issue that was not at all part of what I was planning to talk about, to look at, but the notion that the school context does not support and often inhibits doing expressive things. So then I became more alert, right? So I would be with them in the lounges, in the teacher lounge, and I would hear sleeper conversations. So Anastasia asked me, did you have little Smaro in class last year? And I said, yes. And she said, Smaro doesn't know her letters very well. And I kind of, because maybe if we just focused in kindergarten on letters and we didn't, but little Smaro, she was a little trouble. She was body and had lots of energy and very brilliant, but she wasn't ready for that. But there were small things, the comments, the eye contact, is little Smaro are you doing what you write? If there is music and dance in your classes, maybe it means you don't teach to the curriculum. I don't know if in Greece it's so important to teach. In the US, in the Midwest, in the whole US, it is. So there were small conversations of what page are you? I'm in page 72, but the other teacher is in page 98. Maybe I'm too slow. It's subtle. It's not just that the principal comes and says you're not doing your work. That, of course, happens. But that was not the point, was that it was horizontal. That kind of small comments, small things. So, I won't talk about all the details, but there was very strong pressure not to do the arts and to really focus on what is being tested. So this was an example of deviating from the pole and identifying new issues that I never imagined were important, but they were important. Maybe I'll tell one more story, because it has to do with arts integration, and that is something that you have done in Greece. And that is something I mentioned in Isming. So this was part of a different national study, the Getty. And this was 5 high schools, not elementary high schools, that were chosen to be the best in the country for arts integration. It was a privilege to be there. I appreciate it very much. And so I went to 5 settings, and in these schools, all this curriculum, physics, mathematics, history, literature, all of it were integrated with the arts. Very unusual. Support of teachers, of principals, structures that will change. Fascinating project. We can talk in the reception more if you want to hear. And in the schools, in these particular schools, because there was such strong support from the principal, all the subject mates really were motivated. And I was invited to give the keynote in Bergen for ISME, and I was so flattered, very thrilled. And then when I was starting to think, what am I going to say, I realized that because I was analyzing the data in more depth, that of all the disciplines, math, physics, history, the only people that did not want to integrate were music people. Okay? Everybody was thrilled, but music people don't. And I started to feel really nervous. Like 800 people in ISME giving this talk and like integrating the arts because, and what can I tell them? That everybody else is integrating, but not the music people. And because I was giving the talk, I would like to think that I would have thought about it anyway, but because I was giving the talk, I started to look, first I thought, these stupid ignorant people, why are they so stubborn? Why are they so rigid? Couldn't they behave well, just like all the other teachers? They didn't. There were exceptions, we can talk about it if we have time. The point that I understood is that, and I say them, it's me, the culture of classical music, which is of course so different from some of the other subcultures of music that you are dealing, but the culture of classical, as I was trained and loved and revered, is very rigid. It's about performance, and you have to perform well. You cannot just self-express, right? If you do classical, you do it right. I mean, visual art, creative drama, these are very different kind of disciplines. And so looking at the enculturation of us music teachers, but not just that, looking at the bigger culture. So this was the United States. One of the schools, for example, was in Texas. And in Texas, you have competitions, but in almost all the other schools, you have music competitions. And if the music teacher doesn't bring number 1 2 years in a row, they are fired. This was true, in the late 90s. Fired. It's not that they don't get. We are talking about a culture that is very penalizing. I mean, you get it. But what I'm trying to say is that the kind of the notion and all the different caveats that I did see music teachers not trained in classical, but trained in guitar, which is a totally different kind of not just instrument, but a culture of playing, and what are the expectations popular, or people that were trained in jazz, or people on what did it mean. So I could talk but you have a reception, and you have dinner, and we have a reception. I won't get into that. This is really meant to be appetizer, to say you start with a place, you think that you know what you do, and the best you can do is follow Socrates to say, I think I know, I do as best as I can to know, and when I encounter something that I don't know, it's so much wiser to be honest. To look and to say, okay, professor or no, doctor or not, I thought I did, and my knowledge, it exists, it's not relevant. This situation can teach me something that otherwise I couldn't learn. Okay, if we, so I also want to say the new curiosities, these were 2 examples where my data led me to new curiosities. And we could talk a lot about theory, but I meet many people that recognize theory. They spend years studying Foucault, Bourdieu, whoever, Lucy Green, Ed Gordon, anybody. And then often they use theory like a crutch or like a medal. And it's not easy to study this theory. But when you hold to the theory and you don't dialogue, you don't say, how does my research, my data interact? Can it add, modify, play with? So there is a fluidity, a process that is extremely important that you touched in what you said, that is extremely important, that is part of the inner and part of the holistic. Because it's not a recipe, it's not to say. Many people come and say, yeah, my study basically shows that this theory is correct. You don't do a study to show that the theory is correct, otherwise why do the study? You do the study to play, to deepen, to modify, to show that in this context, whatever. Yeah, you did it. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the ways in which I found, and tomorrow I will talk, I don't want to repeat, but I talk about the ways that I found that my musicianship actually was very central to being a researcher, which is not something I expected. But one of the things that I learned is that as musicians, we tune in when we listen, when we play in ensembles, when we listen to the music. There is a kind of tuning in that is more than content, it's more than information. And that tuning in is extremely relevant and important in when we do fieldwork, observations and interviews. And some of the things that I do with my doctoral students, master's students in Illinois and in other parts of the world is to create exercises that allow people to tune in. That's the assignment, 30, 40 minutes with 2 artworks each, where you tune in and you try to see beyond. And so create a space, you cannot guarantee it, but create a space to that. And then as all of us as music people tuning into tone, to mood, to energy, to silence, to qualities that are extremely musical, that are not just about content and information and verbal, because they are part of social reality. They are a huge part of social reality. Tuning in, you mentioned embodiment. And sometimes I think I'm really good at self-deception. So sometimes I think I'm easygoing and I like it. And then I look at my hands and I see how I'm doing this, or I look at my face. Okay, my body can be wiser about what I really experience. And so to tune in and to say, I mean, I like to be nice and relaxed and lovely. Sometimes I am, and sometimes often not. So just to be, because that is a huge cue about what it is that I see that I didn't know that I think or that I feel, that shapes everything that I collect. We already talked about the dialogue that is kind of ongoing to say, you know, even if somebody is so important as Bourdieu and Foucault, and so to look at what does it really mean for this particular thing. And then the question, after each time that we need to say, did it expand me? Do I see things now that I didn't see before? Do I understand things now that I didn't understand before? I want to say what I'm talking about actually is true for life and for teaching, but we won't go into it now. And kind of reminder that these are the axioms of qualitative research. And it's very central, and I will just talk about it quickly because it's so central. A reminder, not just that we know that social reality is multiple. That when we do something that focuses on social reality, it's about meaning and it's about understanding what is it like for somebody who is an expert on Orff or Kodai, or what does it mean from somebody that has been teaching or doing research for many years as compared to somebody that is just starting the master degree, that people that work with early childhood versus other age levels. Each of us is situated. I think for Yanis, from where you are, you see things differently than Achilles. So even physical, you know, where you are situated here, but emotionally, intellectually, experientially, a Byzantine music context is very different than jazz and Ikram and contemporary and Xenakis. We bring different lenses and they help us see things. So context, in that sense, you don't say, well, I understand what it means. You understand what it means in some ways, but for individual people, when individual people matter, they don't always matter. But we talked about maturity, for example. What does it mean, maturity, in this culture as compared to other culture? So context shapes meaning. I have so many stories about it. I will pass them. But in the way, I will do this particular quick one, that when I came to Illinois, because you're Greek, you may understand it in other ways than Americans do. I remember I talked to a colleague who was a fantastic researcher in qualitative research and in interviewing. I never took a class on interviewing. I asked him, can you tell me what I'm doing? And he saw me, observed me interview an Italian woman, not Greek, but close. And the first thing that he said to me is, your eye contact is too strong. He said, you look at people too intensely. And that means that it looks aggressive. It looks confrontational. And Giordana said, my Italian friend, she said, no, she's just fine. And he looked at her, Terry Nenny, and said, because you do exactly the same thing. So for American people, you find in the Midwest, if you do that kind of eye contact, it could look belligerent. Or when Giordana was saying things and I said, why? And he said, no, too direct, too confrontational, same word. He said, but what do people say in the US? He said, here we say, how very interesting, tell me more about it. Okay? So for me as an Israeli, that's how you establish contact, right? Like I listen to you, I'm with you. even an eye contact before you start to speak. I mean, we talk about body language. Okay, so we talked about emergence, and all of these axioms, they shape the goals, because we are after understanding of cultural and personal. All of these axioms shapes the techniques. We do case studies, we do just a few, we don't look for big numbers. The rules of the games are completely different. And so this is central to shaping all that we are doing. You know, I want to have just a couple of more things, because when we talk about research, there are different genres of research, and it's useful to acknowledge that. But one of the ways, when we talk about seeing more, one of the ways that it supports that is when you look at a culture that you don't know. So this is very famous. You may recognize Bronisław Malinowski, Polish guy who in 1914 did his doctorate in Cambridge, in England, went to Papua New Guinea and went to be there for a few days, few weeks, but stayed there for 4 years because of the First World War. And so when you see him playing the instrument with others, it's very clear that he's not one of them, right? Nobody can mistake Malinowski to one of them. But it's also clear he's playing with them, and he's close enough, and they accept him. And so that notion of when you do research, there is an outsiderness, and the process of writing helps maintain that. And looking at Evie and some of the other people that we have, it's also important to say, this is true in ethnographic, but when we do action research or artistic research or formative research or some people that are, the teacher is the key participant, then we have to do the opposite. We have to look at the familiar and make it strange. But there is constant process of familiar and strange, useful to know where we are coming. I would say for myself that it's very, I would think, am I outsider, am I insider? And very often, like I was outsider to American educational system and to the culture, but I didn't realize that when I was looking at music, I didn't know, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, do you know that? I thought I was Dr. Jekyll, I became Mr. Hyde because suddenly I was an insider, I knew exactly how they should be teaching, exactly. Because in other things I was open, I was interested, but when it came to music, and I was writing, out of the knowing exactly what it was, where I was thinking I was open-ended. Again, we can talk more, but this is to say it's not just in the beginning that Malinowski said I'm an outsider and Evie can say I'm an insider, because these things can shift all the time in that kind of fluid way, and it's useful to be connected to them. Okay, it's good that I use the appetizer metaphor. Okay, let me just finish with these last 2 slides to capture that. I know you have to be at 7 o'clock, so feel free. Okay. Ooh, okay. I don't have to worry about you. Okay. I was trying to speak more quickly because I don't want you to be late. Okay. So I chose. These are kind of summaries and capturing it, and so when I try to cultivate it in my research courses, I ask people to choose one artwork that they like, one artwork that they don't like, and this one I actually like, but it's not relevant. But I ask them to sit with it and to look at the many things that are happening and ask, what can this setting teach you? And so to know that when you're a researcher, even if you're a professor and you're a veteran and you have seen it all, when you go to the class, you are a learner. I am a learner. Doesn't matter how many degrees I have. And the notion of what are the intentions, and then there was another slide that I didn't show, but lingering with it, prolonged engagement, staying with it and allowing it to speak to us. And when I stayed with it, I could see so many things that I didn't see before, like the snake. Do you see little Botero at the end, sound like Velasquez, right? He's there. And the notion of context, because when you know that this is Colombia at the time that you hear, you see the president, you see the priest, the role of the priest in the regime, right? And it's so good that you talk to me about songs that are revolt songs, political pictures. So you know, and you see all these volcanoes, right? I mean, really interesting. And so it means that the cultural meaning, and when you know that Botero did specialize in political things, whether it's the US, but mostly Colombia, his home country. And all of this, the conceptualization that what we are learning and the description are connected. They are not like first we have the descriptions and then we have the meaning. They are together. And that's what you want to do when you write qualitative research. It's organic. And this is the same picture, but the notion here also that the trees, the little details are so organic to the general feeling, that the relationship is what you say, that kind of what do you say to it, what does it say to you. And if people take my classes, it's necessary that they do that. It's necessary in the picture, in the research, to the form, the flow, and when you create a qualitative report, and in another slide that I didn't show, I refer to it, it's really important that you compose it in the similar way. I mean, just as people are very careful about pictures, group pictures, here, to be careful about how you present and what you present, what is foreground, what is it unity, if you think of the cake that we saw 9 slides ago. Yeah, so obviously we could talk, this is the last one, I won't go into that. We could, any of these appetizers, you can have seconds, or we can talk about it in the reception, but I find it extremely useful to ask myself continuously, who am I as a researcher in this setting, in this place, in this time? And if we are good, it changes. You know, what was true a month ago or 3 months ago may not necessarily be true now. So not to be, yes, I already answered that question. No, it's useful to go back to it. What skills, what knowledge, what values? And values are exactly the things that you talked about. When you feel happy or sad, angry, irritated, judgmental, curious, expanded, whatever it is, to note it. These are cues about what the lenses is, what you see here. And intentions are layered. They are not just one, and going back to Socrates, emerging and knowing and knowing. And one of the important issues that was implicit in what you were saying, what are the communities that you want to address? Who are your people? Is it going to be preschool teachers? Is it going to be the researchers? Does it mean that when you address one community, the other one disappears? It can happen. Like, or is it possible to make sure that even if you write to researchers and professors, that the teachers are still present, that if a teacher is there, they would still want... I remember I had a fantastic teacher who was key participant, brilliant, and we had many conversations. For many weeks I would observe her, and then I asked her, I don't know why I asked her, but I showed her what I wrote. I wanted to know if this was accurate, right? She said, yeah, it was accurate, everything is fine. And then I asked her, is it at all relevant to you? She said, no, not at all. Like, what? Like, I asked her just kind of polite, I don't even know why I asked her, but it was like somebody punched me, nothing in it was relevant. And I said, why not? And she said, this is because I want to know how to teach better. I don't care about this interpretation and this meaning. It's not a... And so I learned. And then sometimes I can say, I care about these things, so I want to do it, but I also want to be relevant. And so what does it mean for me to try and be... And at least to know it, not to delude myself as I did before then, and I still do, of course, but not all the time, to say, of course, it's so engaging. No, it isn't. It's engaging to me as the writer, but not always for that particular place. So to be able to ask the question and to be willing to listen to the answer, even if it's not a good answer. So really, now I feel more like the Chinese buffet that I was trying not to, but we had 45 minutes. Thank you for being engaging audience, and I don't know if there is time for questions, but there is a reception.
Δουλεύει, έτσι. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Thank you very much for a wonderful and very live presentation. Questions, please. Μπορείτε να ρωτήσετε στα ελληνικά και θα κάνουμε τα δυνατά να τα μεταφράσουμε. Εδώ έχουμε. Βέβαια.
Said so many things that I wanted to pursue, but
thank you very much. Thank you very much for this speech. I'm coming from the family of the theater practitioners. I used to be a musician as well. I'm not a music teacher, but I found it very interesting, and I think that is very, very related to what I'm doing in theater. And I would like to ask you, you passed very quickly, but the page 9 of your PowerPoint, where you said the phrase, honor your lenses. And I would like to ask you about the connection between our instinct and
instinct? I don't know if this is
instinct
yeah.
and the data that we collect when we research. This is the way I translate honor your lenses, maybe how you feel about
your values. What is important? Why are you in research? I mean, some people think that they're in research to get a PhD and then to get promotion. We are here in life for a very short time. Why are we doing this, right? And so what is important? Some people care very deeply about expression. Thank you. It's so important to have friends that to honor why, because doing research takes so much time and energy. And so the point is that we want to make sure that we get at least as much, like I've given everything I have to my research and I got so much more. So the point is to get more. So that kind of honoring, is it for the right reason? Because it's possible when we do research to write because we want to sound sophisticated. Of course, we want to get promoted. We want to sound smart in our own eyes. It's possible to do it for kind of technical. Now I'm thinking about the story, not peer pressure, but the culture of achievement. I'm not poo-pooing the culture of achievement. But ultimately, what is the message? When we talked about Socrates, what is their legacy? What it is that we hope that people, when they read it, it's not about telling people how to think, because qualitative research, that's not relevant. But what is to honoring the mission that we have, the passion that we have, the care. Maybe care is because care is a little more shy than passion. Passion can be, I'm not against passion. So the things that are really to say, this is what I've hoped to cultivate, to see better. This is what I wanted to see more. This is what I wanted to understand. Because it's not so much about the product, it's really about the processes of what it means for different people, teachers and children and musicians and whoever we do, and have a deeper understanding that we would otherwise. So to honor, each of us has different one. If we had a day, if we had 1 more hour, it would have been so nice and special for me to go around to say, why are you in it? What do you think right now? And sometimes I think it's one thing, and then I realize there are more, it's unfolding. I don't mean to say, again, it's not like a checklist, but I think that you said it right. It's our values, who we are, what we care about, and why we have been doing it, that is beyond the sophistication, the smartness, the wisdom, the other things. But that is a shy voice, I think, and you said it well, Anastasia, that in the bombardment of all the knowledge and the things that we normally produce, there are not many places. I hope what you said is not entirely true, but except psychotherapy, not many places, maybe. Asa says, so what is it there that you really care about? I'm overstating to make a point, but the culture doesn't promote it. It's not a given in the culture that we talk about this, and that we talk about it with hesitation, not from knowledge, because I often don't know when I ask myself. I learn when I hear myself talk. Does that make sense to you? And resonance is one way. So to provide tools to have access to a voice that is less confident. Confidence is not always a good thing. Did I address what you told, or did I just give a lecture about something else?
No. Very helpful. My worry is, I totally agree with you, but very often my worry is that what you described as what we care about and why we're doing this is not very, I'm not sure what the right word is, scientific.
Oh, this is a huge Pandora box. I hope we can. You're right, but you're wrong. Technically, okay.
I hope.
Let me just say 1 or 2 sentences, and we can continue. But the notion, so the axiom, and I am talking from qualitative research, not from quantitative, not from In qualitative research, the axiom is that we are always situated. And the perspective that we are shapes what we see. So we can say, this is a chair, and it's this color. This is a bag, and we can talk about how much it weighs. This is objective. It's scientific in some ways. Mm-hmm. But what we are in this kind of social sciences is we are always situated in a place, in a relationship. And so the objective reality is very important, but it's only a starting point. And to acknowledge where we are is the only credible thing that we can do, because if we look at it as objective, this is a huge distortion of reality. We can talk for a long time, but what you say in postmodernist thinking, when it comes to social and personal human reality, this is where social science is credible. I didn't invent it. I can send you many incredible books. I mean, this is not original. It has been there for 60, 70, 80 years. Phenomenology, we can talk, ethnography. Yeah, you are in good company. We are in good company. The only distortion is when we pretend that something is objective when it's not. The chair is objective. You are objective. The notebook is objective. Angeliki is very objective. We can, she has particular age. But my relationship to Angeliki, my relationship to what she epitomizes, the understanding of what she brings, this is through my lens, and I'm situated in a particular way. So there is objectivity, but our focus is not that. Our focus is relational and perspectival and contextual and multiple and rich and shifting, not just you and Angeliki, but what you were 10 years ago could be really different from now, could be really different. So, context. Heraclitus, so useful. I remember I was 18 when I read Heraclitus, when he says, everything moves, everything moves. And yes, this was the first time I heard it, and it stayed with me. Yeah, the river, but relationship, everything, relationship to what we study. Thank you for the question. I'm so grateful. What is your name?
Valentina.
Valentina, okay, thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Provocation.
Sorry. Okay, I think I'll ask a question on behalf of our postgraduate students. Please, can you raise your hands? Where are you? Hello. Okay. Fantastic first-year students. So, what I understand is students, they have such a difficult time with selecting their topic of their research. And, I always tell them, try to stay true and close to your experience, to your lived experiences, and everything that you've experienced till now. Does this have to do with their identity? And do you think this is necessarily a good thing, staying close to their identity? Or should they move away? Because you talked about expansion and curiosity and these things.
Such a huge, and I will talk quickly, huge and so important. So I would say for me, for my own research experience, for the people, I work with many people, I would say it has to matter in a deep way. So, but let me say something that was related to another topic. So, sometimes when I am in a place, like being a musician and knowing exactly how to teach music theory, there is a knowledge. I know exactly how to teach. I don't need to study it. Of course I don't. So sometimes being an insider and relating to what it is, when I am attached to knowing, unlike Socrates, that's not a good thing. So for me, it has to resonate. But it's something that I really want to be, I'm talking about qualitative, not only qualitative, okay? Because that's what I know. So there has to be, and sometimes I can deceive myself, but then, and I can provide examples, but maybe not now. So the notion of, do I really care about expanding what I am? And then that's like, I think it's possible to introspect and to get a sense of it. Sometimes it's much easier for me to get a sense of what is a topic when I talk with somebody, because the act of writing can be hypnotizing. When you write and the focus is on writing and then the personal voice. Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, yes. So what I want to say, I'm connecting what Angeliki just said to, I think, what we talked earlier. How do we know? So very often research interests, they don't come confident through the door with flex, this is us. There are things that are natural. Like if you work with early childhood, preschoolers, you can say, I am interested in that area. But they often don't have a confident voice because nobody has anesthesia. Nobody asked them, right? Nobody asked, what do you care about? And not in schooling. So the notion of listening, and in my experience and in my doctoral master's students' experience, talking with somebody is extremely important, because the act of writing, like I would say to myself, just write what you're interested, or I felt that I had to write. And I'm sitting and I'm writing what looks good in writing, but it doesn't have a life. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like when I talk, and talking to somebody that really listens, not your supervisor. I mean, if you have a supervisor like Angelique and Smile, yes, but maybe. So talk to somebody who really listens, who really wants to get it, and then listen to the voice. Listen, when are we feeling that we are into it, as compared to proclaiming or thinking. So I would say, yes, setting that is important to you, but when it comes to what issue, what lens, what care, I would say that for me, oral communication can be central in that the energy is not going on writing properly, but on thinking aloud. And like that. I think that notion of does it really matter, and I wish I was smarter and quicker, not in talking, but in knowing these things, and it's so much more important than talking. Because sometimes I think that, and when I stay with it, I realize, no, it's a different element, or I'm thinking I'm open, but I actually am very attached to doing things in a particular way. So it is a process. We talked about lingering, prolonged engagement with the brainstorming, and I know I said it already 3 times, but talk in a way that somebody listens and get a sense of it. And sometimes it's like, do you have in Greece this game, hot, cold, cold, like you hide some. So sometimes like, this area, and then when we go closer, then actually warmer, or it gets colder. No, I thought I am, but it's a different place. So it has a very like vibrant, I think of the word in Hebrew, but almost it's a presence that has aliveness to me, like a picture. When you look at a picture and the picture has aliveness, then it's not a good answer, but it's the best I have. Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's so important, because people just, the way that I used to do it the first time I went to, and it's not an awful way, but it's not a good way. I went to see in journals, how do people have research questions? So I read many research questions, and they look good. And I'm not saying, but then you have to find within the research question the connection, because it's a language, right? There is a Greek, there is English, there is a research language. So you have a sense of how it looks, that it's not ridiculous, that it's not about the meaning of life, that is not about, whatever. So. But then once you have kind of an area, then it becomes, to me, embodied. It's like in other ways. Yeah, and that's why advisors and friends are necessary. I cannot imagine a social, qualitative research without a good advisor and without friends. Maybe we should put it there. Thank you for the question, really.
No more questions?
Thank you.
Again, all of you.